He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
G'day! Welcome to Country Life. I'm Duncan Smith.
Kia ora, great to have your company. I'm Sally Round. Today, an old town hall vault's being put to good use in Raglan. Instead of keeping money safe, it's helping food security. And a Northland man's on a mission to produce more locally grown bananas.
And Cosmo's in Waipara, meeting a scientist-turned-hill country farmer who, like many farmers, is bent on improving the way he does things. And, as he describes it, he's a bit addicted to on-farm trials.
But first, to a roundup of news from the primary sector. And joining us from Kirikiriroa, Hamilton, Susan Murray from the Rural News team. Susan, your first story isn't good news for a country that relies on just that, the primary sector.
It certainly isn't, Sally. Stats New Zealand has just released some new figures, and it's actually showing that the value of our annual goods exports fell. They fell $3.3 billion to just under $69 billion in the year ended December, and that's a 4.5% drop. The reason, I guess it's no surprise, we've heard this all the time, soft demand in that key market of China. Jason Attewell is General Manager of Economic and Environment Insights.
Meat exports were down $1 billion compared to the previous year, from down $1 billion to $8.8 billion. Dairy products were down $1 billion as well to $19.4 billion. And log exports were down about $500 million to $4.7 billion. So there's absolutely been a price impact on the falls there. So dairy products, the prices have been falling. So we actually exported more but got less for it. And very similar with meat as well.
And sticking briefly, Sally, with the export news, ongoing tensions with the Houthi rebels in Yemen. They're attacking commercial shipping in the Red Sea. That's having a big flow-on effect to anyone using that waterway. And for New Zealand, it's making it more expensive to get our onions into Europe. The harvest here, it's in full swing. The yields are looking really good, but the ships are having to avoid the Suez Canal, so they're going around Africa or through the Panama Canal. And that is adding $2 a bag for every bag of onions that lands in Europe. So a little bit costly there. And Onions New Zealand is hoping to export 70,000 tonnes of onions there this year.
And that extra cost will certainly add up for our exporters. Now, what's happening with illegal plantings of New Zealand-bred apples in China?
This is really interesting, Sally, because we've heard plenty, haven't we, over the past 9 or so years about the thousands of hectares of unauthorised plantings of gold kiwi fruit there. And that's had Zespri scrambling to halt the spread and to protect its intellectual property. But yes, this time it's apples, and the New Zealand company Enza Fruit, it's won a legal action against illegal plantings of its Envy apple variety there. Now, the fruit is actually grown legitimately in China with Enza's Fruit's partner Joy Wing Mao, but these others have been growing it without permission. And the victory in the Gansu Province Court awarded Enza Fruit its full claim for significant damages. And Enza Fruit's Morgan Rogers says that this successful plant varieties judgment under China's very newly issued seed law really reinforces the importance of taking this strong action.
Great success there. Now let's talk about cows, the dairy. You've had further confirmation that New Zealand is well past peak cow. What's that mean?
Well past peak cow, when we had the most cows ever. And that was actually a decade ago when it was at its peak, and they've been dropping for the past actually 11 years. We now only have 4.67 million dairy cows rather than over 6 million. And AgriHQ senior analyst Mel Crode says that it's land use changes that are behind the fall.
There's now 42,000 fewer effective hectares used for dairy farming compared to a year earlier. Virtually all regions recorded lower cow numbers, but the largest change was in the North Island, and the dairy herd was back 4% there. What we've seen in some regions, it's been a switch to dry stock farming, so exiting dairying for that. But some regions are also reporting a switch to forestry or avocado farming, particularly up through Northland. So quite a significant change within 1 year.
A quick word still with dairy and the Māori dairy company Miraka. It's based just north of Taupo. It's celebrating founding members who are stepping down as required constitutionally after 12 years of service. They've done just a sterling job. Kingi Smiler, Max Parkin and Mikey Len. They're all instrumental in forming Miraka in 2010. Here's Carl Graydon, Miraka's CEO.
All three of the members that are exiting have had just a fundamental impact and influence on the business. Miraka would not exist without the tenacity and courage and vision of Kingi Smiler, and principally Max Parkin was the one that drove our decision to become, instead of a cheese factory, actually a powder factory. So right from inception, all three of them, including Madame Lien from Vinamilk in Vietnam, have just, I guess, led us with vision more than anything else.
Miraka exports $300 million worth of dairy product, and incidentally, Sally, it's apparently the only processor in the world to be powered by renewable geothermal energy.
Very interesting that, isn't it? Now look, let's turn to the wine harvest. That's not too far away. How are things looking there?
I guess, yeah, it's still early days a little bit, but the indications for a quality wine vintage this year are looking okay. Summer's provided lots of heat, not too much rain in those key growing areas where we've got Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa, Marlborough, Central Otago. But the Chief Executive of the New Zealand Wine Growers, Philip Gregan, says that the volumes will be lower than in the past two harvests.
We've had two good-sized vintages, so I don't see that as an issue. Get bigger vintages, get smaller vintages, and this year we're going to be on the smaller side. The first concern always for grape growers and winemakers is quality. Quality's looking good at this stage. Obviously, there's still a way to go, but the outlook's positive at the moment. Sales are going well. The challenge the industry has, and it's not just been in our industry, but it's more widely, is supply chains got very long and very clogged during COVID. So in the past year, we've seen some destocking of supply chains, so that slowed exports down from New Zealand a bit.
We did speak to a grower who said that the lower volumes for him, that's not such a bad thing because there's still a fair bit of wine left in tanks from last year's harvest.
Thanks, Susan. That was Susan Murray in Hamilton.
This is Country Life on RNZ National 101 FM.
Kia ora. I'm Tanya Ashman and I'm part of the Whaingaroa Environment Centre, and I'm here to talk about the seed project that we've got running here.
Kia ora, my name's Jasmine Hunter and I'm also with the Whaingaroa Environment Centre. The seed bank has been around for as long as WEC has probably, which is over 25 years. The Whaingaroa Environment Centre was started in 1997 by a group of local residents. Our centre hub is in the Raglan Town Hall, and inside that hub is a old walk-in vault. The temperature inside the vault is quite cool, and it's the perfect environment for a seed bank.
We're keen on saving seeds and distributing seeds because it's part of food sovereignty. So the idea is that people have control and access to growing their own food.
How do you collect the seed?
We have in Raglan a number of people who are amazing food growers, gardeners and seed savers. So we've tapped into those skills, especially through the Time Bank. So Time Bank is how you share skills and through a currency of your time. So you do something for someone else, and they give you a time credit. So it's just another way of having a really great community that's working with and for each other.
I think a big factor is that it is free seeds, and people, when they're investing their energy and time into harvesting, donating, packaging, sorting, it feels like, I don't know, there's much greater purpose, like that all of this is going for free to the community.
People can come in and choose the seeds that they want. They're packaged into small, accessible little envelopes with some information, and people are coming along and they're choosing their seeds, and they will often interact with any staff member that's in the office. So yeah,
picking up a bit of knowledge as well.
Picking up a bit of knowledge.
I've had teary moments actually, because we've got this beautiful seed stand that was actually built by a woman who lived in Raglan and ran the woodyard at Extreme Zero Waste. So she built the seed stand out of scrap wood and pallets, and it's on wheels, so we can wheel it in and out of the centre hub onto the front town hall steps, and it's got 4 different tiers, and at the top we've got these beautiful hand pottery bowls that have just got loose seeds with the name of the seeds and instructions, and then underneath that it's a place where people can recycle their seedling punnets as well, like the 6-cell ones, and then next to it we've got a bag of free seed raising mix, so people can actually either pick from the beautiful little origami packets that our Seedy Sorter volunteers put together, or they can fill up the punnets. And so what I've seen is, like, we just get people visiting all the time and walking past. I've seen teenage boys after school stopping at the seed bank, filling up one of their punnets, and then a grandma will come along and they'll have this beautiful interaction and connection, and the grandma will be teaching the teenage boy about the seed, and I'll be sitting in the background watching the whole thing unfold, getting teary and emotional, and just like, this is exactly why it exists. It's not just for food security, it's also for that personal connection between generations, and it's really lovely.
Now, you're also saving heritage seeds.
We have a number of people who are saving a range of seeds, and we have Belinda Goodwin, who is an amazing tomato grower, and she saves heritage tomato seeds. So we've got a whole variety.
And if those seeds aren't saved, is there a danger of losing some of these heritage plants?
Well, some of them are starting to become really associated with Raglan. So we're getting our own range and cultivars that really suit. We've also got taro and kumara, people who are saving and being caretakers of those cultivars as well.
To be fair, there are Māori locally, they have their good collection of heritage potato and that as well. So I would say that there's probably some varieties of food that we don't know about even.
The seed bank is not the only project that you have underway here in Raglan. There's lots going on in this area.
There certainly is. Food sovereignty is a topic that we're all really passionate about here. And alongside the seed project, we have community garden. We've got a lot of education that's happening. We're also doing land sharing and sharing of crop growing. So there's a whole group of people who are working together to grow a large amount of pumpkins and kumara that they will share themselves. There's some guerrilla fruit tree planting happening in the background as well.
What's guerrilla fruit tree planting?
Well, that's where you just find this perfect spot and you go, that really needs a fruit tree that this community can use.
On public land?
On public land, and then you nominate a guardian to look after it.
How many have you got growing?
We're just starting that project, but there's already several down Stewart Street.
We do have a community orchard here as well, which is in a council-owned park. The community around there, they really love it, and there's families around there that years ago planted a fruit tree each, and we maintain the fruit trees by using them as opportunities to teach fruit tree pruning.
And of course, where are we right now? It's the Raglan Growers Market. So the whole aim of the Raglan Growers Market is to encourage and support small growers in Whaingaroa to grow crops that they can sell, so that increases the number of crops that are available, that fresh produce that's available to residents in Whaingaroa. But also we're spending quite a bit of time behind the scenes helping all the stallholders and market gardeners support each other to grow more and bring more growers on board.
Tanya Ashman and Jasmine Hunter of the Whaingaroa Environment Centre, speaking to me in a corner of the Raglan Growers Market.
Do you know how many tonnes of bananas enter the country each year? Jeff Mansell does, and he is on a mission to reduce that number by growing his own bananas and supplying them to local supermarkets. In spring last year, he took Leah Tebbit for a walk through his greenhouse, where he grows a variety of subtropical fruits.
We're in Northland. We're in a small volcanic belt called Mangataperry, and we're about 2.5 hours north of Auckland.
And you're specialising in the subtropical plants, aren't you?
Correct, yes. We bought the property and it had a few feijoa trees on it, and we've expanded those feijoas and figs. We planted some figs as well. And then about maybe 8 years later, we planted some bananas. And then we planted more. And eventually, because I'm a trained nurseryman, I decided that we needed to have a greenhouse so that we could hold them during the winter, store them, all different types of subtropicals. We're trying to introduce new ones from Australia and just seed that's permitted on the Biosecurity Index, and trying to develop more types that will be adaptive to our climate. Yeah.
Should we go have a look at them then?
Let's do that. Yeah.
We walk through a small orchard of citrus at the back of Jeff's house before I spot my first banana plant.
Yes, well, there is quite a bit going on here. We've got 4.7 hectares, so it does tend to be quite large area to look after.
Was it all that 4.7 all in figs and feijoas when you first arrived?
No, so it actually had 4 paddocks. So yeah, three of the blocks were in grass, and we used for some heifers that were on the property when we bought it. And we've actually got probably the 0.7 is actually this bush area at the back of the bamboo, which runs down to our neighbour's drive. So we've revegetated in there and tried to plant some native species that are indigenous to this area or endemic to this area, creating more shelter really from the south. And you can see that the banana leaves tear very easily in the wind, and it's not actually the best for them to tear because all of the cells are interrupted that are carrying the cellulose into the fruit and plumping it up, if you like. So it's kind of like their solar panel and their carbohydrate factory. But if it's torn, you end up with smaller fruit. And they can't operate as they should,
right?
Optimally,
because it kind of it looks like hair almost, like
it's frazzled.
Yeah,
dry hair. Yes,
but it's sort of hanging down as a big yellow bag, which I'm guessing is wrapped around the fruit of the plant.
That's right. Yeah.
What's the concept of the bag?
So the bag has protective features. So the silver side of the bag is to protect from the UVs. You turn the protectant side towards the sun, which is normally on the north side. This one seems to have been circumnavigated, probably by Cyclone Gabriel. That the yellow is, they come in different colours, and the notion with that is you can schedule your harvest depending on what colour you've got. So we've only got 2 colours, yellow and blue, so pretty much we alternate each month. And then with a little bit of flag tape, that's what we know, green was January, pink was February, orange was March, and so on. Gotcha. So that's how you can schedule your harvest time. So it's normally about 6 months when the inflorescence comes out to when it's ready. But the other good thing about the bunch covers which is what we call the banana bags, the bunch covers protect them from mice, rats, possums, birds.
True, they like going up and having a munch, do they?
Yeah, they do. Oh. Yes, but the only real known pest in New Zealand, if you do cover your bananas, then you avoid most pests. But if we had pukekos closer to the house, they can devastate the banana. They tend to eat the stem, and then the plant dies eventually.
Yeah. What is this big shed that's just to the right of us?
Okay, so that big green shed is our packing shed, and we've got a feijoa grader machine in there, and we tend to be locked into a cycle of harvest from February until normally it goes through till May, but this year it actually stopped at Anzac weekend, which is usually our most voluminous. We usually have half a tonne, for instance, over Anzac weekend of feijoas. But yeah, so we grade them in there, and then they're crated up, and then we can take them directly to the supermarket.
So you're supplying to the local supermarkets?
Yes. Yeah.
How long has that been in operation for?
With the feijoas, probably pretty much three years after we got here, Craig, would it be? When we got here, the feijoa trees were very young, so we didn't hardly have any surplus. Took a few years before we had volume, and then with my NZ GAP certification and getting to know the supermarket owners and staff, we managed to be able to supply direct.
And it's just the feijoas that you're sending to the supermarkets, or is there more?
Anything really. So we've got a certification that allows us a range of about 24 subtropicals. So the figs and the feijoas are in there, bananas, papayas, pineapples, and the list goes on. I forget the figure. I think it's something like 72,000 tonnes of bananas are chomped through annually. So there's quite a number of bananas imported into New Zealand.
Right.
So if we can, substitute that with our own grown ones, we'll be...
Better for the environment.
Better for the environment, yeah. Come through and have a look at the greenhouse part of the property.
Is it not the green shed, but the actual greenhouse?
Actual greenhouse, yeah. So a plastic house. It's a 6.6 metre high structure, which is covered in a double skin of plastic, and the plastic's kept apart by a pump of air circulation. And the good thing about that is it provides insulation to the outside temperature with the inside temperature.
For goodness sake, it's a big greenhouse.
It is a big greenhouse. It's 600 metres squared. And then on the end of it, so the whole 100 metre length of this block, that's the shade house at the end of it. So once we get the orders out later in spring, we'll put them in the shade house part for hardening them off, for conditioning them, and then we take them down to Auckland or further afield.
And lining the greenhouse on either side are 2 lines of more banana plants as well.
That's right. So these were the first 2 rows of bananas. This used to be a fig block, believe it or not. But as Craig said, with the lower sunshine hours here and the warm, damp conditions, the varieties that we had in here weren't ideal, and they didn't perform very well. So we put the bananas in those 2 rows. That row first went in about 3 years ago, and then as I got more plants, I was able to put them in, and work our way across. Now that left a lot of space in the middle, and as I said before, the opportunity to hold over winter inside would mean that we could, produce more nursery plants. So they're self-sustaining, the bananas. They just keep throwing up pups, and so that stem there with the fruit on it is what we call grandmother, and the next stem that's going to come behind it will be the mother stem.
Right.
So once grandmother's, once we've taken the inflorescence off the banana bunch off the plant, that will die down, and we tend to cut it down in vertical sections, put it around the base of the banana, and then it breaks down and the nutrient goes back into the soil to feed the next one coming through.
Gosh,
so it's a constant cycle. So we have 3 different types here. We have the ladyfinger type, which you can see are the taller ones, and we have the Cavendish type and the Honduran types. And then within those types we have a number of varieties,
right.
Which we bag up and produce as nursery plants. Come through into the greenhouse. The temperature is quite different in there. Just imagine you're stepping into Australia, or you're stepping through to Malaysia or somewhere in a more tropical clime.
Gotcha.
So here we are in our production greenhouse. So the first 2 years that we were in operation of this greenhouse, we put a raised central bed through the centre, and we wanted to trial the varieties to see which would grow under the 6.6 metre limiting factor of the roof, and whether the fruit was actually going to be 25% bigger, being completely covered in plastic and protected from the environment. And with those leaves that aren't torn, as you can see, they can produce the optimum size fruit indoors.
Right. And so to sort of describe, it's got a sawdust floor. Yeah, you've got lines and lines of all sorts of different plants, even cacti as well. Yeah. It is quite warm in here, but I can only imagine it's a lot warmer in summer.
It is very hot in here. So hot air rises, so we've got a top vent there. The house is environmentally monitored for temperature, humidity, and we've got a monitoring system on the irrigation. And we also have misting in here, so the only thing that keeps the temperature down during very, very hot days is the misting system. So moving along here, there's some abu, which is from the upper Amazon regions.
What's behind us right here?
Okay, so these are tropical papaya, and interplanted to utilise all this space that we've got left is pineapples, queen pineapple, and we've got a few of the cayenne pineapple as well.
And the pineapples that are here, they sort of look like yuccas or something that you've planted just for show, but it's because the fruit hasn't come up through for them yet.
That's right. So this one here, so it has had its fruit in the past, but we're leaving it there to propagate more suckers from it. So this one here has a fruit coming up through the middle.
Oh, it does too. It's sort of red, actually.
It's actually in the bromeliad family, so it's not a cacti. But they do resemble cacti in some ways because of these prickly spines.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the bromeliad family, and the central tube is where the pineapple comes out. On this side we've got these lucuma, which is often used for flavouring in ice cream in South America where they're from, and another one called Canithdale, which has butterscotch flavoured fruit, and yeah, again it's used.
Butterscotch flavoured fruit.
Yeah, well, yes.
Delicious by the sounds.
Yeah.
What are the type of people coming to you? Is it families or those that have immigrated to New Zealand and looking for it, or is it just sort of your average Joe Bloggs gardener that has a passion for bananas and wants them in their own backyard?
It's all of those, really. We have had a few elderly groups through. We've had some school children through. We've had plenty of Asian people that like the kind of fruit that we're growing here, and also all different sectors of society, really.
And all across New Zealand as well? Or?
Yeah, I think it's definitely location specific, but in certain areas you can grow them well, and there's always the opportunity to grow under cover, as we are under these covered structures, and that's, I think it accounts for, is it 70 or I think it's more like 80 or 90% now of internal consumption in countries around the world like Turkey. They grow their bananas under cover. In Spain they grow them under covers. So you would think there that the climate would be ideal for growing them outside, but we've seen kilometres of greenhouses over there, and they grow a lot faster and the cycle time is quicker. So I think there's scope for where those areas where they can't grow outside, you can always grow them inside.
We reach the end of the greenhouse and head out past the shelter belts into paddocks of plants.
There's 200 plants outside,
Yeah.
and there's about 300 to 500 plants inside that greenhouse at the moment.
Truly.
So this was a feed jar block. So they're planted at 4 metre spacings. So what we had to do is adapt the irrigation lines to bring them into a 2.5, 2.7 metre spacing between the bananas is what we've got in these rows. We've kept the root ball, of the feed jar that's in between the two bananas.
Yeah, I can see. We've basically got one line of bananas in front of us and then the next are feed jars, aren't they?
Absolutely. So those two rows there, if you like, were taken out of the greenhouse after Cyclone Gabriel. We managed to get some woofers, some willing workers on organic farms, and we managed to plant another 2 rows of, well, almost 2 rows. So it's really a row and a half there. You can't see the extent of it, the full extent, and they have survived over winter. That's how adaptive they are,
It's quite a long field that we're on at the moment,
They're
isn't
quite
it?
long rows, yeah, they're over 100 metre in length, and each end we've got the headland so that we can turn our vehicles around and take the harvested product up to the shed, which is normally in crates, and it's normally was feijoas in this block.
What motivates you to keep going with all the banana varieties?
I guess there's always more varieties around the corner. You know, finding out what the early introductions were that were brought into New Zealand when it was able to be imported. It's now a prohibited import to bring any kind of germplasm into the country of bananas. We can only bring in the fruit, but not the plant material. So I think it's just the novelty of it. There's always more out there, and seeing the different types that are being grown overseas that were brought into New Zealand at the time, like the red Dakar and the dwarf Jamaican. So it's trialling those as well. So there's always, you're always learning. You're on this journey.
Jeff Mansell of Kotari Subtropicals there, just 15 minutes outside of Whangarei.
Hi, I'm Sam Neill. I'm here at Two Paddocks, and you're listening to Country Life on RNZ, my favourite show.
Last year, Waipara farmer Ian Knowles was crowned the Canterbury Regional Supreme Winner at the Balance Farm Environment Awards. He also won a stack of other gongs at the awards for soil management, livestock agri-science, farming efficiency and climate recognition. Not bad for someone who came into farming later than most. When Cosmo Kentish Barnes turned up at his Glenmark Springs property, Ian was getting his dogs out of their kennels.
What are your dogs called?
It's Ebby and Ritz. Ebby! Ebby's the only hunt away I've got, so she's sort of the noise machine. And Ritz is my oldest heading dog. She's pretty clever. She does most of the cleaning up jobs, and she's mother or grandmother to most of the other ones I've got.
How important are they in terms of helping out on the farm?
They're vital. That's number one part of the team really. Is I really enjoy the stock work, and that's the bulk of sort of what I do most of the day. So yeah, without them I'd be chasing sheep myself.
So where are we heading to now?
So we'll just head up the farm. We had a wee bit of rain this morning, so we'll just go and check that everything's still where it should be. Hopefully the crops are picking up a bit of this rain and we'll keep growing through the summer.
How much rain did you get?
I've got about 6 mils. It's just enough to dampen the dust down. It certainly won't be enough to get the grass growing back to a green state, but it will help the crops and the newly sown pastures just keep alive and get through the summer in a good state.
Tell me about the farm here. How long has your family owned it?
So my mum and dad moved up here in the early 2000s, so we've been here just over 20 years. And in the meantime, we amalgamated 2 properties, so purchased the neighbouring property and added it onto the original home block. So that takes a wee bit of time to get the 2 logistics joined up in terms of access and tracks and water and electric fences. So there's a wee bit of development was required in the early stages, and then hopefully now we can sort of consolidate now that we've got a bigger property and hopefully start making some money.
And it's a beautiful farm here. How would you describe it?
It's a nice part of the world. It's sort of rolling hill country. There's quite a bit of cultivatable area, about 300 hectares, but the bulk of it's medium to steep hill country. So it gives a nice balance and a nice sort of, I guess you'd call it a work lifestyle balance within the business, because every time you drive around a corner you get a slightly different view, and as you get to the top of the hill you can see up to the Kaikoura Mountains and out to the Alps, over to Hamner and Colverton, and then back to Christchurch. It's quite nice sitting up there and seeing all the lights of Christchurch in the evening time, so we get a 360 view if you get in the right place.
Now we are winding our way up towards the top of the hill, and already we've got an amazing vista. Are those poplar poles that I can see?
Yeah, so the last couple of years we've had a lot of support from ECAN and their SCAR team, which is the soil conservation team. We've had some really dry seasons and some very wet seasons, and because of that a lot of the at-risk areas of the farm that have got maybe soils that aren't that well formed or don't have a lot of vegetation have sort of slipped or created a bit of tunnel erosion, and so we put in about 35 hectares of poplar poles to try to help stabilise a lot of the steeper hill country areas where I'm probably never going to put a tractor or grow a crop. So it's not having a major impact on the production of the farm, but at the same time environmentally it's ticking a few boxes and hopefully heading us in the right direction in terms of securing the soil and protecting the waterways.
We can see some dense pockets of native bush.
Yeah, so we climb a lot of elevation in quite a short time, which means we get lots of little pockets of native gullies and guts that have never been really developed, so they're just in their natural state. We've got a QE2 covenant out the back of the farm and a archaeological site as well from Ngaitahu protected area. So
is that an iwi covenant?
Yeah, it's an archaeological site, so there's some rock drawings in there that you just like to maintain and protect them in the state that they're in.
Now we've come to one of the high points on the farm. Ian, describe what we can see around us.
We're sort of in a bit of a microclimate here, so we're surrounded by reasonably big rocky hills and gullies, but they all run east-west, which means that in here the predominant northwest and southwest winds tend to go clean over top. So they're quite sheltered gullies here, really good soils down on the base of the gully because most of it's over time with wind and rain has washed off the rocky outcrops. So quite deep soils. I do quite a bit of cropping out here. It's really warm country in the winter for the stock, and because of the good soil types and that sort of microclimate, we can grow really good crops, and I've actually got a fruit orchard just around the corner too because it just suits it so well.
We can see a mob of sheep grazing on one of the hills. What are they feeding on?
Yeah, so previous life I worked for Ag Research. We used to study a lot of plant and animal genetics, so I'm still really quite passionate about that. So the two crops in front of us is fodder beet, which is the key for the wintering of all the stock. And what they're grazing now is called raphno, which is a cross between a radish and a kale, and it grows like a weed. It's excellent. Wee bit expensive to grow because it's new and novel, but the stock really like it. So at the moment, the hoggets and their lambs, so the ewes that are only a year old themselves, have got their own lambs running around behind them. They're on that just to make sure they're all growing, and then hopefully if we'll get a shower of rain in the autumn time, it'll grow away again, and I'll be able to push that feed into the winter and make sure the young stock are fully catered for the year ahead.
Now you mentioned that you used to work for Ag Research. What sort of area did you focus on?
Yeah, so I was a latecomer to farming practically, but I used to work in the agriculture industry, the Telford College or Ag Research or beef and lamb, so I had quite an exciting job off farm, but always wanted to go farming. But the real passionate part was when I was working in the Ag Systems team in Ag Research. They try to pick up all the new technologies and new ways of doing things and actually see how that's going to work and practice on farm. So we had a lot of monitor farms and worked with a lot of high-level farmers that were really keen to try new technologies, and they were almost the guinea pigs. So I was very lucky to be able to rub shoulders with some very clever farmers, steal a few ideas from them along my career at Ag Research, and then hopefully try to put some of them into practice now.
Do you do lots of on-farm trials here?
Yeah, I'm a wee bit addicted to trial work. I didn't leave that hat behind when I finished at Ag Research. So most of the sheep genetics, for example, are all based out of trial mobs that I've had here, and find out what works and what doesn't and then multiply them up. And also with the plant genetics, if there's anything new and novel, I'm pretty keen to get a couple of hectares in to see what it looks like on farm. Try to sort of lead from the front and make my own mistakes, and you've got no one else to blame then.
What traits are you looking for in sheep?
Yeah, well, sheep are the real key to the business. They're about 80% of the income, and they're about 80% of the workload too. So what I'm hoping to do is try to keep the profitability up while reducing the amount of work. Just as I get more lazy and older, I try to work smarter and not harder. So at the moment I'm chasing just sort of outright growth rate because wool hasn't been very profitable for many years, and it's about time I let that just disappear out of the business, I think. So trying to get a more meaty sheep, shorter tails. I don't believe that we're really going to be able to justify cutting tails off in the future, and I'd like to have genetics that are already at the stage where they don't get fly stroke or dags, and a nice short little natural looking tail that doesn't need to be changed. So that's the sort of direction I'm heading in at the moment.
And you also do dairy support?
Yeah, about 20 to 30% of the business is looking after cows for the dairy farmer. So when they don't get in calf, they come up here for basically a sabbatical. So they leave the milking shed after one lactation. If they haven't got in calf, they come up here for the year. The bulls come up, get them back in calf, and the following season those cows go back down to the dairy farm. So they're up here for a full year. They're a great tool in terms of cleaning up any surplus, poor quality pasture. Because they're already fully grown, I don't need to worry too much about giving them heaps of quality feed because they're already a mature animal. They just need to be on maintenance. So they add a really important dimension to the business.
What is your biggest expenditure here?
The biggest expenditure would be growing feed, and that's either through fertiliser or the regrass and cropping program. That's probably about half of the money is spent in the business.
Have you done any trials with non-chemical fertilisers?
Yes, I have, yep. For about 4 or 5 years ran a fertiliser trial on 2 different sites on the property with all the conventional fertilisers, everything you could possibly find in a fertiliser company, and also comparing that with a few sort of more natural type products like your seaweed based fertilisers. Yeah.
What were your findings? How did they compare?
Yeah, it gets really complicated because obviously the solid chemical based fertilisers are all funded around science trials, so you put on X amount of kilograms and you know within a pretty tight range what sort of outcome you're going to get. And I found that really consistent. Every time I put it on, tested the soil afterwards or measured the grass production, it was almost, spot on really. Then when you get into the less researched ones, the more natural type products, all over the place, you're seeing some results you weren't expecting, and then often you weren't getting the results that you were hoping for. Sometimes it would take maybe 18 months or 2 years to see a result, and it was hard to know whether it was as a result of that special unknown mix that you put on or whether it was just some random act. So because it sort of lacks that scientific rigour, I've been pretty hesitant to spend much money on those natural type products just because it's so unreliable, and when you've got a reasonable amount of debt and a lot of animals to feed, you do need a bit of consistency of outcome.
What are your thoughts on regenerative farming practices?
Yes, I've played around with a few regenerative mixes. There's some really interesting things happening in there. I think particularly around the pest control part of it is where I get excited, is if we can maybe stop spraying for problem pests because there's wasps or butterflies that are coming into those crops which are chasing the nasty bugs away and helping the nicer bugs multiply up. That, to me, that seems like a really good outcome. But the more species you put into a mix, the harder it is to try to manage it. And so we're finding that most of those regen mixes are reverting back to what I'd normally put in anyway, which is your clovers and your chicories and plantains. That's about all that seems to be left after a couple of years. So they're expensive. They look really good for a couple of years, but I think we can probably simplify those mixes.
In terms of profitability, how much money are you hoping to make this year from your farming operation?
Yeah, so the ballpark budget for the long term is around about $1 million gross income with about 50% working expenditure, and then you take out of that your interest to the bank and bank payments and living costs and all of that. So at the moment the meat market sort of tanked a wee bit, so the lamb prices are well back on where they've been the last couple of years, so that all the costs are the same if not higher, and yet the income's going to probably only be about 60 to 70%. So the next couple of years is going to be tightening the belt. There's not going to be much coming at the bottom, and so just trying to consolidate and maybe cut a few corners in terms of costs just to get us through the next couple of years.
Now, you mentioned that you've planted an orchard here. Can we go and have a look at that?
Yeah, we sure can. Yep.
What's your stocking ratio here?
Yeah, so run about 10 stock units on average per hectare. Obviously quite different up on the native hill, doesn't grow a lot of feed, and then these better quality paddocks is where the real engine room is in terms of growing young stock and finishing lambs. So typically you have about 4,000 breeding ewes and about 1,000 mated hoggets, so they get in lamb hopefully in their first year of life, and then I run between 200 and 300 cows.
Now, normally people have their orchards near their house, but this orchard here is plonked in the middle of the farm.
Yeah, it's because the yards are here and I spend a lot of time out here doing stock work. It sort of made sense to have the fruit trees here, and we have got fruit orchards and gardens and things closer to the house, but it's sort of nice to have something at the back of the farm. It's a good excuse to come out here, and often you get a bit hungry and you think, an apple or something would just get me through to lunchtime. And so it's such a lovely little outlook here, so protected and good water supply. I thought, it's a great place to have a wee orchard. So there's all sorts of stuff here. We start off just with one of everything, and then the ones that worked out well have sort of multiplied up. So we've got apricots and apples and limes and pears, plums, currants, feijoas, nashi pears. So there's heaps of stuff there, and then the ones that work well. So the feijoas are great. They've got such a long season and they keep so well. So there's about 4 or 5 months of the year I can come out and have a feijoa for morning tea.
Yeah. And Ian, tell me a bit more about the Maori rock drawings here on the farm.
Yeah, so there's 26 individual drawings that have been noted and reported on. There may be more, but some of the areas are not that easy to get to. So several decades ago, the Canterbury Archaeological Research Team came and did a survey of the area. So there's a few neighbouring properties as well as our property that has some archaeological significant sites, which have got a covenant on them just to protect them, to make sure they stay the way they are. So that's around excluding cattle from grazing, because they tend to rub and bunt on things and they're big bullies and they might knock the rocks around, and also not to plant it in forestry or put buildings on it, so as we can try to maintain them as best we can.
Now, as well as sheep and cows, you also have a collection of rare animals and birds here, don't you?
Yeah, I'm very lucky that the farm's big enough that I can run a commercial unit, and also there's enough little nooks and crannies where I can have peacocks and alpacas and ostriches, and the farm already had some deer fencing on it, which meant that I can contain a lot of animals that you probably wouldn't be able to have on a normal sheep farm, and hopefully they stay where they are supposed to be, behind the deer fence.
I can see a peacock there running along the track. My gosh, these ostriches are, 2 metres tall?
Yeah, plus a bit, and when they get angry they seem to grow another foot taller as well. The males are pretty imposing, but the hens are actually really kind and gentle.
How many ostriches have you got at the moment?
So there's about 10 adult breeding birds, and there's 15 of last year's chicks, and then a good friend of mine, Adam, down in Waipara, has the incubators and brooders, so he's got about 30 little tiny chicks down there for this breeding season.
Which ones are the males?
So the males are black feathers with a pink beak and pink legs, and then the females are just of a plain brown colour. So the females are that colour because they sit on the eggs during the daytime, so they need to be camouflaged in the dirt in the desert, and the males sit on the eggs at night time, so they need to be black so as you can't see them at night time in the dark.
So how many eggs is this girl here sitting on?
So they tend to, they lay every second day over a couple of months, so each female tends to lay sort of between 30 and 50 eggs in a season.
Gosh, a lot.
Yeah, we've been collecting them up and putting them in an incubator to artificially raise the chicks this year. It's just a safer way of doing it, because they tend to just find a bit of bare dirt and have a bit of a scratch and start laying eggs, but on the hill country the eggs tend to roll around a wee bit. And now that we've got enough eggs in the incubator, we'll probably just see if they'll hatch some out naturally themselves. So there's quite a few eggs in the nests on the paddocks at the moment.
So if I walked into that paddock now, would the male attack me? Would he be quite protective of his mate?
Yeah, so you definitely need a big stick if you're going in there with him. But normally I just work them with the dogs, and they're pretty good. But as I said, the males, when they get aggressive during the breeding season, you're just sort of best to give them a wide berth.
What are these ostriches called?
So when I only had a few ostriches, I used to give them pet names, but these are all just random ostriches. They've actually got tags and numbers, but there's 2 breeding groups, and then last year's chicks, which are as big as mum and dad already, down on what was a regen paddock, so they've been pecking away at leafy turnips and sunflowers and clovers and all sorts of things, so they've been growing pretty well out there.
Oh, I can see them down at the bottom of that paddock mingling with the sheep.
Yeah, everything just has to get along here. The ostriches are the boss of everybody, but yeah, there's deer and goats and peacocks and alpacas and llamas, and all just sprinkled out amongst the commercial sheep and beef farms, so you never quite know what you're going to see when you're driving a paddock.
Now you can eat ostrich. What's the best meat on them?
The only meat they have to speak of really is on the legs. They're just two giant drumsticks running around with a furry coat, so there's no breast meat.
One of those thighs could feed a family. They are huge.
Yes, there's about 30 kilograms of meat on each bird as they're running around, so the meat itself tastes pretty good. It's similar, I think it's a cross between sort of a venison and duck, and the eggs go really good if you want to make an omelette, but you just need to make sure you've got plenty of people, because it's the equivalent of 2 dozen chook eggs, so it's a very big omelette.
I've got some nice pictures of some of the ostriches, and if you'd like to see them, go to the Country Life webpage. One day, do you think you might have a commercial herd here? Is that something you would be prepared to do if it was worth it?
Yeah, so they go pretty good. It's quite similar to the deer industry in terms of being able to multiply them up and grow them out. Like the growth rates and the weights and the end products are very similar, I think, to venison. So it certainly can be done, but it's the old chicken and egg thing. Like, you need sufficient numbers to be able to market the product, but if you don't have a market for the product, then there's no point in really multiplying them up. So at the moment we're a wee bit in limbo as to whether we go bigger or just reduce it back to having a few pet ones running around.
Well, they are pretty happy here. They've got lots of paddocks to roam around in, and they're looking very healthy too.
Yeah, the Waipara climate really suits them. It's typically pretty dry underfoot, nice warm days, so they can handle as much heat as you throw at them. They're used to being in the desert, so the only challenge we have is for the young birds, keeping them warm and dry when they're little until they're big enough to look after themselves, and after that they're pretty much bulletproof, really.
Ian Knowles with some ostriches on his hill country farm in North Canterbury. Well, that's it for this week. Thanks for joining us.
Bye now.
Ka kite anō.